Hello everyone, welcome to Excel VBA full course. I'm excited to share what I have learned from VBA and I hope you enjoy this course and find all the materials here helpful in your current or future projects. Let's talk about the course outline. So here are the topics for this VBA course. I will start with a quick introduction to VBA. We will set up our coding environment. Then we will cover the basics of VBA. Then next is the VBA's flow control and flow control elements. That includes the different types of operators in VBA, the if, else, and Elseif statements, and the for next and do while loop in VBA. Next is functions in VBA, and we will also discuss exception handling. And after we complete the basics of VBA, we will start writing code that interacts with the Excel workbook and worksheet. We will create a simple programs that reads and write a value to Excel. You will learn how to call a procedure from a button or shape, and we will also create a program that reads data from a different workbook. And another interesting topic that we will cover is string manipulation in VBA. We will create a program that extracts data using the most common string functions. I also prepared exercises for you to practice what you will learn from each of the topic. And next to that is the VBA user form. We will create a simple tool and you will learn different user form controls in VBA like the text box, label, command button, and many more. Then for our last topic, we will discuss using Selenium in VBA for web automation. In there, we will create programs that open a browser, navigate to a web page, click a button or link, input a text, and parse some information. VBA stands for Visual Basic for Applications. It is a programming language developed by Microsoft and integrated into major Microsoft Office applications such as Word, Excel, and Access. And learning VBA allows you to access functions beyond what is available in the MS Office application. You can use VBA to customize the application to meet the specific needs of your client business, such as creating user-defined functions and automating computer processes. Now let's get started with VBA. Luckily for Excel VBA, you don't need to install an additional text editor to run VBA code. All you need is an Excel application installed on your machine. And to run our first VBA program, let's open an Excel desktop application. And before we start writing VBA code, it is a good practice to save the file first as a macro-enabled workbook. So let's click this Save button. I will name this file Excel underscore VBA and select the correct file extension, which is .xlsm or Excel Macro Enabled Workbook. Then you can choose a location. I will save mine to my documents and hit the save button. And to write VBA code, we need the VBA editor. And there are two different ways to open it. First, look for the developer tab in your Excel ribbon and click the Visual Basic button. If you don't find the developer tab, you can go to File, then click Options, click Customize Ribbon, and tick the developer checkbox in this part and hit OK. The other way is using the shortcut key, which is Alt F11. Here in the VBA editor, I want to introduce the immediate window. You can open it by clicking View and then click Immediate Window, or the shortcut key for that is Control G. So immediate window is like what other programming languages call a terminal session or an interactive shell. And in this window, you can quickly test some VBA code. It is also helpful in terms of debugging your code. So let's follow the tradition by writing our first code, hello world. And there are different ways to print a value in the immediate window. First, we can use the print function and then the hello world value as an argument. And when we press enter, it will print the value hello world in the following line. The second way of printing value in the immediate window is using the debug.print function and again use the hello world value. as an argument. And if we press enter again, it will print the value in the following line. The third way to print value in the immediate window is using the question mark character, then typing the string value hello world, and if we press enter, we will get the same result. So in VBA, the code is not case sensitive. If we use the function print with the lowercase p, and again use the value hello world as an argument and press enter, we got the same result because using print with uppercase P and using print with lowercase p is just the same. Now let's enter question mark and then 2 plus 2 at the immediate window to have VBA do some simple math. And in VBA, 2 plus 2 is called an expression, which is the most basic kind of programming instruction in the language. Expression consists of values such as 2 and operators such as this plus character, and they can always evaluate down to a single value. So if we press enter, we get the result 4. And you can use plenty of other operators in VBA expression too. For example, you can use subtraction operator, for example, 10 minus 5. You can also use multiplication operator, let's say, for example, A times 4. And you can also use division operator, let's say, for example, 15 divided by 5. Another operators in VBA is the modulo operator, and you can use it to get the remainder after an integer division. So for example, let's try 11 mod 4, and when we press enter we get 3 because 3 is the remainder after we divide 4 from 11. And another operator is the exponentiation operator in VBA. And to do that in VBA, we need to use the caret character. So for example, 3, and we want to get the exponent of 3, and then if we press enter we got 27. And the order of operations, also called precedence of VBA math operator, is like that of mathematics. So the exponentiation operator is evaluated first, then the multiplication, division, and modulo operators are evaluated next from left to right, and the addition and subtraction operators are evaluated last, also from left to right. And you can use parentheses to override the usual precedence if you need to. So let's try a sample in the immediate window. If we write this expression 2 and then exponentiation operator 3 multiplied by 3 and press enter, we get the 24 as a result. So here the exponentiation operator has a higher precedence than the multiplication operator and got evaluated first. However, if we write the same expression and use a parenthesis, so let's say for example 2 and then exponent, and then let's use parenthesis and 3 multiplied by 3 and press enter, we get different result, which is 512. So the parentheses override the usual precedence and evaluate the multiplication operator first. In VBA, the white space between the operator and value doesn't matter. So if we write uh, 3 and then if we add some spaces before the operator and after the operator and input 2 and press enter, we still get the correct result, which is 5. The meaning of an operator may change based on the data type of the value next to it. So for example, the plus character is addition operator when it operates on two integers or floating point values. However, when the plus character is used on two string values, for example, hello and then world, what will happen is it will join the string as the string concatenation operator. So the expression evaluate down to a single new string value that combines the text of the two string. However, again, if you try to use the plus character or operator on a string, for example, hello, and an integer value, for example, 3, so VBA will not know how to handle this and it will display an error message. Another way to concatenate or combine values in VBA is using the ampersand symbol. So let's try the same expression, but this time let's use ampersand instead of the plus character. And if we press enter, ampersand character or operator evaluate both values as string and evaluate down to a single string value. Variable is a named memory location with a value that can change during the script execution. If you want to use the result of an evaluated expression later in your program, you can save it inside a variable. When using variables in VBA, you must adhere to a few rules and guidelines. Be sure to keep the following variable rules in mind. So first, you must use a letter as a first character. Second, you cannot use a space, a period, or an exclamation mark and other special character. And third, the name cannot exceed 255 characters in length. And lastly, you cannot use Visual Basic Reserved keyword as a variable name. So you will store values in variables with an assignment statement. An assignment statement consists of a variable name, an equal sign called the assignment operator, and the value to be stored. So if you enter the assignment statement spam is equals to 42 in the immediate window, then a variable named spam will have the integer value 42 stored in it. Actually, we can verify that if we use the exclamation character or the question mark character, and then let's ask immediate window what is the value of spam, and then press enter, and we get 42 as the result. Okay, so what we have done so far is to output text or values and expression in the immediate window, but where should we write VBA code? Well, technically you can write VBA code on any of the worksheet file like this, even in the disk workbook file. But to write our first actual VBA code, I want to introduce a module. So modules are an area where we can write our VBA code, and since this is a new workbook, there is no module by default. So to insert a module, you can click Insert and then click Module, or you can also right click here in the project window and select Insert and then click Module. So let me name this module first. I'll name it Mod and VBA. Next, I'd like to introduce procedures in VBA. So procedures are a group of statements executed instructing Excel how to perform a specific task. And in VBA, the two main types of procedures are sub and function. The main difference between the two is that sub procedure do not return a value, while a function may or may not. And let's write our first actual VBA code using the sub procedure. So to write a sub procedure, we need to use the keyword sub and give it a name. So I'll name the procedure my first program. And after I press enter, you will notice that it automatically adds parentheses and an end sub to the procedure. So inside the procedure, let's first add a comment. Let's say this program will say hello, then ask for my name and age. So this line is called comment, and VBA ignore comments, and you can use them to write notes or remind yourself what the code is trying to do. So any text for the rest of the line following the single quote is part of the comment. Next, let's use debug.print function to print hello. And then let's declare a variable that will hold the username. So to declare a variable in VBA, you need to use the keyword dim, which is short for dimension and is used to declare local variable. So I will name the variable username of type string. And next, we want to ask for the username, and we can do that by using the input box function, which waits for the user to type some text on the keyboard and press enter or OK. So let's use input box and ask for the username. Then let's assign the value typed by the user to the username variable using an assignment statement. So here we can type username equals to the input box. And then let's print another value saying it is good to meet you. Let's add some space and then concatenate the value of the username variable using an ampersand character. Let's also print another value that counts the number of character in the username. So let's say the length of your name is, and then let's concatenate it to the function len. So the len function evaluates the integer value of the number of characters in the string. And you can pass the len function a string value or a variable containing a string. So here we can use the username variable as an argument. And then let's close this debug.print. Next, let's declare a variable for the user age. So again, we'll use dim and then let's name the variable user age of type integer. And then again, we can use input box to ask for the user age. What is your age? And then using assignment statement, we can assign the value typed by the user to the user age variable. And lastly, let's print a value that will tell the user's age in a year. So again, let's use debug.print function. And then let's say you will be, then concatenate it to the expression user age plus 1, and again concatenate it to another string value in a year. All right, so now to run the procedure, ensure that your mouse cursor is within the procedure and then click the run button or the shortcut key, which is F5. So now if I run this, we can see this input box show up where it asks for the name. So I'll just say John. You can press enter or hit this button OK. Next, it will show another input box asking for my age. Let's say, for example, 20, then hit enter. And here in the immediate window, we can see that the first line printed is the value hello because we have that here. Next is saying good to meet you with the name of the user, which is what I provided, which is John. Then it also prints the number of characters in the username. In this case, it is equals 4. And lastly, the user's age in a year. So I provided 22 earlier, but since we have an expression to add 1, it results to 23. Flow control statements can decide which VBA instructions to execute under which conditions. But before you learn about flow control statements, you first need to learn how to represent yes and no options in VBA. So let's start with Boolean values. Boolean data type has only two values, true and false. For example, we can create a variable spam and assign a Boolean value true. And if we press enter and check the value of spam variable, we get the Boolean result true. To compare two values in VBA and evaluates them down to a single Boolean value, we can use the comparison operators, also called relational operators. First is the equal operator. For example, we can check if 42 is equals to 42, and if we press enter, we get the result true. Next is the not equal operator. For example, we can check if 2 is not equals to 3, which also result to true. Then we can also use the greater than operator. For example, we can check if 12 is greater than 23, which results to false. We can also use the less than operator. For example, uh, we can check if 34 is less than 23, which results to false. And we can also use the less than or equal operator. For example, we can check if 44 is less than or equals to 54, which results to true. And lastly, the greater than or equal operator. So for example, we can check if 54 is greater than or equals to 32. So in this sample, the equal to evaluates to true when the values on both sides are the same, and the not equal to evaluates to true when two values are different. So aside from integer values, the equal and not equal to operators can work with values of any data type. For example, we can use it to compare two string value. Let's say, for example, we want to check if hello is equals to hello, which results to true. We can also use not equal to operator to compare Boolean values. For example, we can check if true is not equals to false, which is true. So the two Boolean operators and or are used to compare Boolean values. Like comparison operators, they evaluate expression down to a single Boolean value. So for example, we can compare if true and false, so that result to false, or we can also compare true and true, and that results to true, or we can also compare using the Boolean operator or, for example, true or false, which results to true. So far, the Boolean expression you've seen could all be considered conditions, which are the same thing as expressions. The condition is just a more specific name in the context of flow control statements. And conditions always evaluate down to a Boolean value, true or false. And a flow control statements decide what to do based on whether its condition is true or false. And almost every flow control statement uses a condition. So now let's create a new module. So right click, insert new module, and I will name it module flow control. And in this module, let's create procedures and use flow control statements. So I'll create a sub procedure name condition. Then I will declare a variable name of type string and give it a value of Alice. So let's start with if statement, which is the most common flow control statement type. So using if, we can check if the variable name is equals the value Alice. And if the condition is true, we need to use the keyword then to execute some code. But before we add code to execute, let's add an end if statement first. And inside the if condition, we can add a message box saying, "Hi, Alice." And then let's add an information icon to the message. So the message box line, we can also call it an if statement clause that will execute if the statement condition is true. And the clause is skip if the condition is false. So if we run it, We should see the message box saying hi Alice because the condition is true. Next is else statements. So an else statement can optionally follow an if clause, and the else clause is executed only when the if statement condition is false. So for example, in the code we can add an else statement, and inside this else block we can show a message box saying hi stranger. Oops. And then let's add an exclamation icon to the message. So we can still see the same result if we run the code now because the condition still equals to true. So to execute the else clause, we can change the value of the name variable to George and run the procedure. So now we can see a different message saying hello stranger with an exclamation icon. Okay, next is the else if statements. So while only one of the if or else clause will execute, you may have a case where you want one of the many possible clauses to execute. So in the code, we can add an else if statement that check if the name variable equals to George. Then if the condition is true, we can show a different message saying, or maybe just hi again, hi George, and use a BB information icon again to the message box. And if we run the procedure, we see a new message box saying hi George. Let's discuss loop in VBA and create a new module. So insert module, and I will name this module loop. So let's start with the do while loop statements in VBA. So you can make a block of code execute repeatedly using a do while statement. So I'll create a sub procedure named do while loop. And first I will declare a counter variable x of type integer, then initialize the variable with a value of 1. Next, let's create a do while statement using the keyword do while and loop while the value of x is less than 5. And let's close the loop with the keyword loop. And inside the loop, we can use the debug.print function to print the value hello world in the immediate window. So lastly, we need to make sure to increment the counter variable. So we can say x is equals to x plus 1 because if not, it will become an infinite loop and we want to avoid that because it could crash our program. So if we run the program or the procedure, we can see the hello world value printed in the immediate window 4 times. So the loop stops when the value of the counter variable x becomes 5. So if we want to loop 5 times, we can change the expression from less than to less than or equal. Then let me just clear the immediate window and run the procedure. And now we can see that the hello world value is printed 5 times in the immediate window. Next, the for next loop is another looping statements in VBA. So let me just add some spaces here. So let's create a new procedure and I will name it for next loop. And we can do the same thing for simplicity with the do while loop procedure, but this time using the for next loop statement. So first I will declare a counter variable x of type integer. And then in the for statement, we can initialize the counter variable x to the value 1 and use the keyword to and indicate the limit of the loop which is 5. And we must use the keyword next and the counter variable name x to close the loop. So inside the for next loop, we can again use the debug.print function to print the value hello world in the immediate window. So let's clear the immediate window again. Now if we run the procedure, we can see the hello world value printed in the immediate window 5 times. So in the for next loop, you can also use the keyword step because by default, the next statement increments the counter variable by 1. And using the step keyword, you can increase or decrease the counter variable by the value you specify. So in the code, if we add a step and specify a value, for example, 2, what will happen is that the counter variable will increment by 2 in every loop iteration. So if we run the procedure now, or let me clear the immediate window first and again run the procedure, we see only 3 hello world values printed on the immediate window. So the debug.print function only executes when the variable counter value is 1, 3, and 5. Another looping statement in VBA is the do until loop. So let me just add some space again. And it is a helpful loop in exceptional cases where you want the loop to execute at least once. So let's create a new sub procedure and name it do until loop. Then let's declare a counter variable x of type integer and then initialize the value to 1. So next, use the do keyword and close the loop with the loop until statement. And here we can use the expression x is greater than 5. And inside the loop, we can use the function debug.print and again the value hello world. Then ensure to increment the counter variable. So again, we can do that by using x is equals to x plus 1. So if we run the procedure, let me clear again the immediate window and run the procedure. We can see hello world value printed in the immediate window 5 times. And in VBA, there is a shortcut to getting the program execution to break out of a while, for next loop, or a do until loops clause early. So if the execution reaches an exit statement, it immediately exits the loops clause. So for example, in the do while loop procedure, if we want to break the execution when the value of the variable x is equals to 3, we can do that by adding an if condition in here. So let's say for example, if x is equals to 3, then let's add an end if. Then to break the execution, we can use the exit do statement. So now if I run this procedure, we can see that the hello world value is only printed 3 times in the immediate window because it break the execution when the value of the counter variable x becomes equals to 3. And we can do the same thing in the for next loop. So here we can again use an if condition. So if x is equals to 3, then and if, then we can use the statement exit 4 instead of the exit do because this is how you can break execution in the for next loop. So let me clear the immediate window, and now if we run this procedure, we can see that we have hello world printed now only 2 times in the immediate window. So lastly, let's do the same in the do until loop. Let me clear the immediate window first, and then here let's add an if condition that if x is equals to 3, then since we're using do loop here, we can again use exit do. And if we run this procedure, now we can only see 2 hello world printed in the immediate window. So let's quickly talk about the random function in VBA. And to do that, let's create a new procedure and name it give random number. And first, I will declare a variable name random num of type integer. And say, for example, if I want to generate a number between 1 and 6, to do that, I'll create an expression that starts with parentheses and then indicate the largest number, which is 6, and multiply it with the random function RND and close the parentheses and then add the smallest number, which is 1. Since the random function returns a single data type value, we must convert it to an integer using the integer function. So the integer function in VBA is int, and then we can use the random expression as an argument for the int function. And after that, we can assign the output of that expression to our random num variable. And this is how you can generate a random value between 1 and 6. So last, let's print the random number value in the immediate window using the debug.print function and then the random num variable. And if we test the code, first we got 5, then 1, 3, 6, 5, and so on. So this is how you can generate a random number in VBA using this expression and then the random function as well as the integer function. The examples I've shown you so far are useful for introducing basic concepts, but now let's see how everything you've learned comes together in a more complete program. So in this section, I will show you a simple guess the number game. So when you run this program, it will generate a random number and the output will look like this. So first, it will show a message box saying that it is thinking of a number between 1 and 20. And when you press the OK button, it will show an input box asking you to take a guess. So let's say, for example, if I try to guess the number 10 and hit OK, if your guess is less than the random number, it will show another message box saying that your guess is too low. So when you hit OK, it will show the input box again and ask you to take a guess. So let's say, for example, maybe 15 is the number, hit OK. Again, it's too low. Let me guess it again, maybe 17, hit OK. My guess is still too low, and maybe 19, it's too high. So now let's say 18, and if your guess equals the random number, a message box will say good job and you guess the number and also the number of guesses that you made. Okay, so let's start by creating a new module and giving it a name, guess the number. Then create a new sub procedure with the name guess the number. So first we want the computer to generate a random number. So let's declare a random number of type integer. And we want to generate a random value between 1 and 20. So to do that, we can say int and then the largest number, which is 20, multiply it to the random function and then add the smallest number, which is 1, and then assign the output to the random number variable. Let me just add a comment here, random value between 1 and 20. And next, we want to count how many times the user guessed the number. So let's declare another variable named guess CTR or guess counter as integer, and we'll give this variable an initial value of 0. And then after that, let's show a message box saying I am thinking of a number between 1 and 20. Then let's add an information icon using BB information. And we want the code to keep asking the user to guess until he guesses the correct number. So we can use a do while loop to do that, and the expression true. Then close the loop using the loop statement. And inside the loop, first let's increment the guess counter variable. So you can do that using the guess counter variable, and that should be equals to guess counter variable plus 1. So we can track how many times the user guesses the number. Next, let's declare a variable that will hold the user's guess. So I will name that variable user guess as an integer type. And then we can use an input box to ask the user to take a guess and assign the value to the user guess variable. And after that, using an if condition, we can check if the user guess x is equals to the random number variable value. And if the condition is true, let me just close this if statement first. So if the condition is true, we can show a message box saying, good job, you guess the number in, then let's concatenate the guess counter variable and the string guesses. And let's add an information icon to the message using BB information. Else, if the user guess value is greater than the random number, we can show a message box. Sorry, there should be no space between the else and if. So if user guess is greater than the random number, we can show another message box saying your guess is too high. And then let's add a critical icon using BB critical. And before I forgot, here, if the user guessed the random number, we also need to break the execution using the exit do statement. And next, we also need to check if the user guess is less than the random number. So we can show a different message box saying your guess is too low. And again, let's use a critical icon to the message. So now we have the program completed. If we run the program, try to play the game and see how many guesses would take for me to guess the correct number. So let me hit OK, and then maybe I'll try 10, and that is too high. So let me try maybe 8. That's still too high. Maybe 5. It's still too high. Okay. So maybe 3. Too high. Maybe 1. It's too low. So probably that is 2. And now I got the correct number, and after 6 guesses. So that is our simple program where we combine at what we have learned on the previous section of this video. You are already familiar with the debug.print, input box, message box, random, and len functions from the previous section. And VBA provides several built-in functions like this, but you can also write your functions. And a function is like a mini program within a program. So to better understand how function work, let's create one. And I already created a new module and I name it function. So let's create a function using a keyword function and give it the name hello there. And inside this function, let's print the value hello world using debug.print. Now, if we run this function, we can see the hello world value printed in the immediate window. And we can also run a function by calling it from a sub procedure or another function. So for example, let's create a sub procedure with the name main, and then we can call the function using the function name hello there. And let's call this function 3 times. And if we run the main procedure, let me just clear the immediate window first and again run the main procedure, we can see the value hello world printed in the immediate window 3 times since we call the hello there function 3 times in this procedure. And remember that a function is a procedure that may or may not return a value. In our first example, the function hello there, it does not return a value. So now let's create a function that returns a value. So let's create a function and give it the name add numbers. And this function requires two integer parameters. The first one is num1 as integer, and the second one is num2 as integer. Let's also give this function an integer type using as integer. And by doing this, we are specifying that the return value of this function is an integer data type. And inside this function, let's do a simple expression num1 plus num2. And to return a value from a function in VBA, we must assign the expression result to the function name, which is the add numbers. And since the function requires parameters, we cannot run it alone. You won't see it available on the macro name if you try to run it. It is because VBA knows that this function requires some values to execute. So what we can do to run this function is by calling it from a sub procedure or another function. So let's create a sub procedure named main. And inside the procedure, let's declare a variable sum as an integer. And then set the value of the sum variable equals to the function name, which is add numbers. And then provide argument to the function two parameters. So for example, 3 for num1 and 5 for the num2. And to validate the function return value, we can use the debug.print function and use the sum variable as an argument. So now if we run this main procedure, we can see we get the result 8 in the immediate window because in this procedure, it calls the function add numbers, wherein it provides the argument 3 and 5 to the function parameters. And here in this function, it execute this expression num1 and num2, assign that to the function name, wherein the function return that value in the main procedure and assign that value to the sum variable, and it got printed in the immediate window using the debug.print function. Right now, getting an error or exception in your VBA program means the entire program will crash. And you don't want this to happen in real-world program. Instead, you want the program to detect errors, handle them, and then continue to run. So for example, consider this simple program that uses the debug.print function to print the result of the expression 42 divided by 0. And if we run this expression or procedure, we get a runtime error. If this happens to your code, your entire program will crash, and we want to avoid that. So let me close that. And in VBA, there is a different approach to handling errors, and you can refer to this quick guide to error handling. So let's try some of the items. For example, in the on error resume next, you can place that error handling statement before the code line causing an error. So let's try to put that in here on error resume next. And this type of error handling ignores the error and continues. So let's try to run this procedure again. And this time we don't see any runtime error and we have the procedure executed completely. However, I don't recommend this type of error handling because you bypass the error in this approach and it could have some severe effects on the overall program. So for example, if you place this line inside a loop, you will not even know how often you get an error. And another way to handle errors in VBA is using the onError statement. And with that approach, you can control what should happen if your program gets an error. So let's replace this statement with the onError statement. And then here we need to specify the label or the line VBA will execute next. So for example, let's use the label error handler. And then before the line of code we want to execute, when an error occurs, we can put the label we use, which in case is error handler. And after this line, we can print the error in the immediate window. So let's say, for example, we want to print divide by 0 error. So now if we run this procedure, we don't get any runtime error. The procedure was run completely, and we can see in the immediate window that divide by 0 error is printed. In real projects, you can log the error somewhere to check later or for auditing purposes. Now that we know the basics of VBA, we can use it to create procedures that can read and write values in Excel worksheets. We can loop through Excel data, or we can also read values from different workbooks and many more. So let's start by creating a procedure that reads a value from a worksheet. So here I have a worksheet named data, and we also have sample user details with his name, age, and gender. So let's create a procedure that reads these values and prints them to the immediate window. So let's open VBA Editor and let's create a new module. I will give it a name Worksheets. Now we will deal with Excel object, but let's keep it simple. So with Excel sheets and VBA, you'll have to understand the core structure of how it all works. So when we open an Excel, our first level is the application, and we can have different worksheets inside the Excel application, which is the second level. Then inside a worksheet or sheet, whatever you want to call it, we will have ranges of cells. Then we also have individual cells. And the reason we need to understand this structure is because this is how we are going to code when dealing with Excel worksheets. So now let's create a sub procedure and name it a read value. And first, let me split my window and have the VBA editor on the left, or I mean on the right, and the Excel worksheet on the left, so we can reference the worksheet while we are coding. Let me extend the VBA editor window. I think that's fine. And inside our procedure, let's create variable for each of the data. So let's start with the name of type string, then age as integer, and then gender as string as well. And remember, the first level in the Excel structure is the application. So if we go to the immediate window and type application and also type the a period, we can access a set of properties. And one of these properties is the this workbook. And with this property, using a period, we can access another set of properties. So for example, we can print the name of this workbook using the name property. So if I put name and then press enter, we get the name of this file or this workbook. Or you can also access the path property. So let's replace name with path and press enter. Now we also get the path of this workbook or this file. And we can omit the word application here. And if we try to execute this command, we get the same result, which is the path of this document. Similar if we try the name property. So when we use the word this workbook, we refer to this Excel application. That is why when we access that name property, we get the name of this file, the same as the path. And to read a value from the Excel sheet, we can start with this workbook, which is the first level. And next is the worksheet level, so we can use the property sheets and then indicate the worksheet name, which is data. And then the range level, so we can use the property range and indicate the cell address. So for example, for the name that is in cell V1, so let's use B1. Or you can also use the cells property. So if you want to use cells, you will replace the range with cells and then indicate the row and column number of the target cell. So B1 is, or in a cell is row 1 and column 2. So you will do it like this if you prefer to use cells. But I prefer using the range property. So let's return it to range and then indicate the cell address, which is B1. And lastly, we can access the value property of range B1. Then we can assign this value to the name variable. And we can do the same syntax for the other two variable. Let me just copy that. And let's replace the variable. So this should be for age and the cell address should be B2. And last one is gender and the cell address should be B3. And using debug.print function, we can print the value of this variable in the immediate window. Let me clear the immediate window first and then use debug.print. Start with name, age, and then gender. So now if we run it, we can see the user details printed in the immediate window. And to improve our code, we can declare a variable for this workbook and worksheets. So let me minimize this immediate window first and clear the content. So here, let's declare a variable named TB of type workbook. So workbook is an object type in VBA, and to assign an object variable in VBA, we need to use the keyword set and then the variable name, which is TB. And then let's set this variable equals to this workbook. And let's declare another variable named DSH. It stands for datasheet. That's my preferred way of naming worksheets, and they should be of type worksheets. So worksheet is another Excel object type, and to assign a worksheet again, we need to use the keyword set and the variable name DSH and set it equals to the TV variable, which is our this workbook, and then the worksheets and indicate the worksheet name, which is data. So instead of using the long syntax this workbook that sheets data, we can replace it with our variable DSH. So let's replace that with DSH, similar to this one, and oops, this one. So now if we run this procedure, we get the same result. Another way to improve our code is using the with and with statement in VBA, and using it, you can perform a series of statements on a specified object without specifying the object names multiple times. So here we have the object name DSH, which represents the this workbook and sheet data. So to use the with and with statement, we need to start with the with keyword and then indicate the object variable name, which is DSH. And then to close this statement, we need to use the keyword and with. So using this approach, we can specify the object name only once because as you can notice in here, we are using the variable name DSH multiple times when we are assigning value to our variables. So what we can do now, we can move this line of codes using Control X. We can move that inside the with statement block. And within a with statement block, you can specify a member of the object, which in this case is the DSH, starting with the period as if the with statement object preceded it. So here we don't need to use the variable or the object DSH anymore. We can remove that. And if we run this procedure, but let me clear the content again first. If we run this procedure, we get the same result. So what we have here is just a simple program, but you will see the importance of using this approach when working with a complete program. It will help you improve and organize your code. This time, let's create a procedure that writes value to Excel. So I will name that procedure write value. And then inside this procedure, we can start by declaring a worksheet variable. I will name that DSH as worksheet. And then we can set that variable equals to this workbook that sheets and then indicate the worksheet name, which is data. And again, we can use the with statement. So with DSH and with. And again, using the with statement, we can access the property of this object using the period. So let's start with the range property. And the first cell that we want to write value is cell B1. So let's put here B1 dot value and let's give a sample name. For example, is Maria. And then the next cell is range B2 and let's give her an age, maybe 23. And last is the cell B3 for the gender field. And then let's have female value in there. So now if we run this procedure, we can see these values are transferred to the Excel cells. And this is how simply you can write value to an Excel. You've already know the concept of worksheet variable and why we are using a with statement, how this could be helpful when you are dealing with Excel worksheets. Another important thing when you are working with Excel worksheets, of course, when you deploy a project with VBA code, you don't want the user to run the program here from the VBA editor. Instead, you want, like for example, a button that they can click, and the VBA will automatically execute or triggered once they click that button. So to do that in VBA, let me maximize this worksheet window first. There are two ways. First, you can use an ActiveX button. So you can go to Developer tab and you can insert an ActiveX control or a form control for creating a button within your Excel worksheet. But from my experience, I'm not using any of this because sometimes they are having issue when there's an update on the OS version or window version. What I recommend when you want to use a button is using the shape instead. So for example, here we can choose a shape. For example, this shape, and then let's have this button here. And then let's say, for example, let me just name it right value, and let me give it a better format first. And maybe we can, uh, maybe this one is enough. And once you have the shape that you want to act as a button for you, you can right click on the shape and then select assign macro. And here you will see all the sub procedure that you created in VBA Editor. And here we can select the right value sub procedure. And then let me clear this value first. And now if I click this button, it will trigger my right value procedure and it will send the value to this Excel cells. Now let's create a program that can transfer data from this worksheet to another worksheet. So let's add a new worksheet and name it records. Then let me just zoom in this worksheet. And here let's add column headers for name, age, and gender. Then let's also add some format to make it look better. So let me just add some width or column width. Then let's center the text. And then let me add some background color. And let's change the font color of the header to white. Now going back to the data worksheet, let's change the caption of the button write data to add. And then let's also remove the current macro associated with the button. So you can right click in this button, click assign macro, and just delete the value in this box and hit OK. So now there's no VBA associated to this button. And the goal of this program is after we input a user details and click the add button, the program should transfer the details to the record worksheet. And to do that, let's open the VBA editor. Here in the VBA editor, I will be using the same module worksheet. And let's create a new sub procedure and name it add record. Then inside this procedure, a good practice is to add a comment indicating what this procedure does. So let's say transfer user details from data worksheet to records worksheet. And then let's start by declaring two worksheet variable. So the first one, let's name it DSH as worksheet. So this variable is for the data worksheet. And then the next one is RSH as worksheet. So this variable will be for the records worksheet. Then let's set the DSH variable equals to this workbook that sheets data. Then the RSH should be equals to this workbook again, but this time it's the sheets records. Next, let's declare a variable for each of the data. So let's start with the name variable. It should be of type string, and the gender should be of type string as well. Then we also need an age variable as integer. And now we can assign the data worksheet cell value to the variable, and we can use the with statement. So with DSH, which is our worksheet object variable for our data worksheet. Then let's ensure to close the with statement with end with. And then inside the with block, let's assign a value to each variable. So the name variable should be equals to the range, and the cell address is B1. Then let's use that value, and we can do the same for the age. This time it should be B2, and the gender is equals to the range B3 dot value. And before we can write the variable value to the records worksheet, we must identify the next available row first in this worksheet. So let's declare a next row variable. So dim next row, and I will be using an integer type. And there are different ways in VBA to identify the next available row in a worksheet, but here is my favorite syntax. So first, let's indicate the worksheet name, which in this case is our variable RSH. So that is our worksheet variable for the record worksheet. And then next is to access the range property. And then we must indicate a reference column. And that column should always have a value. So let's say, for example, we can use column A and then concatenate it to the function rows that count that and xlab that row. So this syntax will return the last row with a value on the specified column. So if we try to test this in the immediate window, let me just copy that, and then instead of using RSH, I will be using the this workbook that sheets records, or yeah, we can omit that since the current active worksheet is record. I think we can execute the syntax. If we execute this, we get the result to 1, and that is the header row. So it means that row 1 is the last row with value in the records worksheet. And we can add 1 to the syntax to get the next available row. So if we add 1 here and then press enter again, now we get the value 2. So using this syntax, we can identify what is the next available row in the records worksheet. So now let's assign, make sure to add 1 here. Let's assign this syntax to the next row variable. So next row will be equals to that syntax. And next, let's use a with statement again to write a value to the record worksheet. So let me just add some space here. Let's say with RSH, and then let's close that with statement. Let me add some comment here as well. Write value to records. Then inside the block, we can access the range property of the object RSH. And let's start with the range. Now the cell address should be flexible this time because the next available row keeps updating. So we can start by indicating the column name. So for example, first column is A, and then we can concatenate the next row variable. So that is next row, and then access the value property and then set it equals to the name variable. Now let's do the same for the other variable for the age and gender. So age is column B. Then let's concatenate the next row variable and set it equals to the age variable value. Then last is the column C, and that will be equals to the gender variable value. And lastly, we want to clear the input value in the data worksheet after we click the add button. And then we can also show a message box. So to do that, we need to indicate the worksheet. Let me just add a comment first. Clear data inputs. So to clear these values, let's first indicate the worksheet variable, which is DSH, and then let's access the range B1 to B3, then use the function clear contents. And there are two ways to clear the value of cells in VBA. First is the clear contents, which only deletes the cell's value. The other one is the clear function, where it deletes the cell value, including the cell formatting. Since we have some border here in our data worksheet, we don't want to remove that format. So instead of using clear, we will be using clear contents. Then we can show a message box saying record has been added. Then let's just add some information icon to this message box. And let me clear the immediate window content first. Now I will associate this procedure to our add button here in the data worksheet. So to add that procedure, again, right click to the button, assign macro, and then let's look for the add record procedure, which is this one. So just double click on that. And then now, since we already have a sample input here, let's click the add button. Here you can see that the inputs have been cleared and we received this message that a record has been added. Now let me click this OK and let's check the record worksheet. And now we can see here the record that we added. Let's try to add some other user details here. Maybe 122 male. Now let's click add again. Record has been added. Let's try to add another one before we check. Maybe George. 30 and again male. Let's add, it has been added. Now if we check the records worksheet, we can see both Juan and George added here. And this code is also flexible. As you can see, add it is keep on adding the new user details to the next available row in this records worksheet. Another common scenario when dealing with Excel worksheet is when you want to copy data from another workbook. So let's create a program that does that. So here I have another workbook file named sample data, and it contains sample office supply records, and our goal is to copy this data to our workbook using VBA. So first let's create a new worksheet and name it office supply. And then let's add a button that we can trigger later to copy data from another workbook. Let me just zoom in this worksheet first and then insert a shape as our button and just change the caption to copy data and then select a different background color. Maybe we should center this text. Now let's open VBA Editor. I will still be using the same module worksheets. And then let's create a new sub procedure and name it copy data. And let's add a comment on what this procedure does. So this will copy data from another workbook. And inside this procedure, let's declare a worksheet variable name OSSH. So OSSH stands for Office Supply Sheet or Worksheet. And now let's set that variable equals to that worksheet office supply. Then we must declare a workbook and a worksheet variable that refers to the other Excel application. So first, let's declare a variable name SWB as a workbook. So SWB stands for the source workbook. So let me just add a comment here, other workbook or Excel application. Then we can set that variable equals to workbooks that open function. And in this function, we need to indicate the file path. So let me just check the file path first. So this is the file that we want to copy data from. So to get the path of this file, we can select it and then press Shift if you are on Windows, and then right click and then look for the copy data as path. Where is that? Or copy as path. And then let's go back here in VBA Editor. Now we can paste that path. And next to that, once we have a variable that refer to the other workbook, we can next declare a variable name that refer to the worksheet within that workbook. So let's name that variable SSH. It stands for source sheet. So it should be a worksheet. Now let me add a comment there. And then we can set that variable equals to the source workbook, which is the SWB variable that sheets, and the name of the worksheet in the other workbook is sales orders. And let me verify first if that's the correct worksheet name. So let's open this file, and yeah, the worksheet name here is sales orders. So in this variable, the SSH variable, we are referring to that worksheet. And before copying the data from the other workbook, from this workbook, we must identify the last row in the sales order worksheet first. So going back to VBA, let's declare a variable named last row of type integer, and then we can set that variable equals to the syntax for getting the last row. So our worksheet here is the SSH, and then use the range property, and let's indicate a column that always have a value. Let's just use a column, and then rows that count function that end xlab that row. We don't need to add one because we just want to get the last row with value. So that syntax should be enough. And to copy the data, we can use the SSH worksheet variable again. And then we need to indicate the target range, which is from range A1. And we can validate that. We want to copy from A1 to the column G up to the last row. So here we can say column G, and then we can concatenate the last row variable. To copy the value from this range, we can use the copy function. And to paste the copied values, we need to indicate the target worksheet, which in this case is the OSSH variable. And then we need to identify the starting cell to paste the data. So let me just check that. Not that one. So we want to paste the data here in the A4. So let's go back to VBA, and here let's say range A4. Then we can use the property or function paste special, and here we need to indicate the paste type. So we can just select paste all, and that is how we can paste the value we copied from the other workbook. And once we copy the data, we should also close the workbook using the closed function. So let me just add a comment here. So the other workbook variable is the SWB. Then we can use the function close. And this function has a parameter save changes. So we don't want to save any changes, so we can just say false. And before we test this procedure, let's close the file first, or the other workbook file. And then now I can associate the procedure here in this button. So we can right click here, assign macro. Then let's look for the copy data procedure. Just double click on that or click the OK button. And now if I click this button, alright, we got a confirmation message because there's a large amount of information on the clipboard. So let's just select no for now. And now if you can see here in the Office Supply worksheet of our Excel VBA file, we have the data copied from the other workbook. So let's try to improve the code. So here technically we are opening the workbook using VBA, and if you don't want to see that happening when running the procedure, we can use the command Application.ScreenUpdating. And to use that command, we need to place it before opening the other workbook. So that should be in this line. So we can say Application.ScreenUpdating is equals to false. And then we need to place another one after closing the workbook. So that should be here. Application.ScreenUpdating is equals to true. And earlier, you see that we are getting a confirmation message when VBA execute this line swb.close because there are large data still within the clipboard, and we can actually bypass that. And to do that, we can copy a single cell from this workbook. So for example, um prior this function, we can copy the value of the OSSH worksheet and range A4. So we can just use the that copy function, and that should no longer ask us to confirm if we want to retain or not the data within the clipboard. So now let's save this file first and make sure that the other workbook file is not open. So now let me just manually clear this for now and delete that. Oh, maybe we should create a procedure that clears this, okay? So let me highlight from the cell from here and then Control Shift arrow down, and then I will name this range. So I need to, where is my formula bar? Oh, let's select view, make sure to show formula bar, and then I will name that selected range maybe clear office supply, and then I will copy that. And here let's create a procedure, another procedure named clear office supply. And inside this procedure, we can say this workbook, the sheets, office supply, that range office or clear office supply that clear. We will be using clear because if you notice the header have some formatting, so and we want to remove that. So now we cannot test it because I delete data manually. But now let's also create a button for that clear procedure. I think I can just copy this and then just give it a different color, maybe red. And let's change the caption to clear and also associate the clear procedure to this button. So where is that clear office supply? If we click that, we are getting an error. Let's see why. This workbook, the sheets, office supply, the clear. What's the error? Let me check again. Okay, now I changed the name to clear office and it works. So let me replace the value here. Let's stop that. Let me try to execute it from here. Now we're not getting an error. Similar if we click this button for clearing the value. So now let's click this copy data button again. And I hope you see some improvement. We don't see the other workbook opening when we run the code. We also did not receive the confirmation message box anymore. And it just takes some seconds to copy the data from the other workbook here. Now let's test this clear button. it clears the data. Now let's try to click copy data button again, and here we get the same result. In the sample program, we use a static file path of the other workbook. And using a static path may not be the best approach because the file path may change and we don't want our users to edit the file path in the code directly if it happens. So we can make the code flexible, allowing the user to select a file when they run the program. And to do that, we can use the command Application.GetOpenFileName in VBA. So first, we must declare a variable for the file path. So I will just name that variable fpath, and that should be of type string. And then we can use the command application.getOpenFileName. And this command, when executed by VBA, it will open an open dialog where the user can select a file. Then VBA will return the path of the selected file. So next, let's assign this command to the file path variable, which is fpath. And first, let's test the code by printing the file path value in the immediate window using the debug.print function. And let's also add an exit sub to end the procedure after printing the file path value. So let's run this procedure now. And here you will see that it opens an open dialog where we can select a sample data or a sample file. So let's select this. And here in the immediate window, you can see the path of the selected file. So in the code, we can replace the static file path with the variable path and make sure to remove the exit sub. We can also remove the debug.print. We only use that for testing. And let me also clear this one. And now let's go back to our worksheet and let's clear the data first. Now let's click the copy data. This time it will ask us to select a file. If I select this one, we get still the same result as what we did when we are using the static file path. But now our program is more flexible because it will no longer be an issue in case that the user moved the file to another location or to a different location. In some cases, you want to avoid copying everything from another workbook. Instead, you only need to get specific data that matches a condition. So let's create a sample program to do that. First, let's insert a new worksheet. I will name it items. And let me just zoom in this worksheet. And here I will add a text label, select an item. And I want to put here a data validation or a drop down where user can select a specific item. So let me check what sample item we can use. Pencil binder and desk. Let's try that. So to add a data validation, just go to data, click data validation, and here we need to select list. And let's try pencil. I forget the others. Binder and desk, I guess. Let's hit OK. Now, if we check this, we have these three items. Did I see binder? Yeah, we have a binder items. And then next to that, we can add a button that user can click to upload a or to copy a data from another workbook. So here, let's give it a different color, maybe yellow. Copy data, and then let's center the text. And here, let's also add some format here, and let's add a border in this cell. Okay, so our goal in this program is that user first will select an item in here, and then once the user click the copy data button, it will ask for user to select a file, and then from that file, the code should only copy the item that matches the selected item by the user. Another thing that we need in this worksheet is the column headers. So let me just copy that and put that in here. Okay, and then let's also create a range that we can clear. So I will highlight from A6 to G6 and then press Control Shift arrow key down, and I will name that range clear items. Okay, it works. So if we select that name range, yeah, it is selecting that range. All right. So now let's open VBA Editor, and again I will be using the same module. So all the worksheets related code are in this module, and let's add some spaces here. Then let's create a new sub procedure, and I will name it copy matching record. And again, as a good practice, let's add a comment indicating what this procedure does. So it will copy matching record from another workbook. Okay, so let's start by creating a variable for our items worksheet. So I will just name that ISH as worksheet and then set that variable equals to this workbook that sheets items. So that's the new worksheet that I created. And then after that, let's create a variable for the other workbook and to our target worksheet within that workbook. So let's add comment here, other workbook, Excel. Let's start with the workbook variable. I will name it again as WB as workbook. And then we need to set that variable equals to this workbooks that open function, but here we need to indicate the path of the file. So before this workbook declaration, let's also declare a file path variable. I will just name it fpath of type string, and then that variable should be equals to Application.GetOpenFileName, so that this procedure will allow us to select a file, and then with the selected file it will get the path, and that's fpath variable. We can pass that to this workbooks that open function. And maybe a good practice is that every time you open a different workbook, make sure that you are also closing it by using the function that close, and then again there's a parameter here if you want to save changes. In this case we don't want, so we use the false. And now that we have a variable that represent this workbook as well as the other workbook, we can start looping through the another workbook file and validate if there are records that matches the selected item by the user. So first, let's have a variable first that holds the selected item by the user. So let's add a selected item by the user. I will just name it item selected or selected item as string, and that should be equals to, if we go to the worksheet, so that is cell B3 of the items worksheet. So we need to use ISH because that's our items worksheet variable that range B3 that value. Then next we can loop through the other workbook file. So we need to start looping from row number 2 because row 1 is the column header. And then on each row, we will need to check the value of column D because that's where the item value is. So now let's go back to VBA and then let's start the loop. First, we need to declare a counter variable. I will just use X as integer. And then let's use a for next loop. and initialize the counter variable to 2, which is the first target row. And then we need to know the last row of that worksheet. So we can do that directly here. What we can do is indicate the worksheet name. We don't have a worksheet variable yet from the other workbook, so let me comment this one for now. And here, let's declare a new variable as sh as a worksheet and set that variable equals to the source workbook that sheets sales orders. Let me just confirm if that's the name of the worksheet, sales orders. Okay. And now, here in our for loop, we can check the last row of that worksheet. So let's use the worksheet variable ssh that range a and rows that count that end xlab that row and then next x for the for next loop. And then here we want to validate if column D value is equal to the selected item. So to do that, we need to use an if statement. So if ssh that range D and concatenate the counter variable that value is equals to the selected item, then what we want to happen is to copy that row to our workbook. But before we can copy that row, we need to first identify the next available row in our worksheet. So here we need to check the next available row here in the items worksheet. So in the VBA, let's add some comment. Next available row in the items worksheet. So let's declare a variable first. I will name that next row of type integer, and then next row is equals to what's the name of our item worksheet that is ish. So range, and then here we need to indicate the column that always have a value, and then rows that count, that end, xlab, that row. And to get the next available row, we need to add 1. So here you can see this syntax twice, one for the target worksheet where we are copying the data, and then the other one for the item worksheet where we will put the data we copied from this worksheet. So now that we identified the next available row in the items worksheet, we can copy the data or transfer the data here if the condition is match. So we can say um, hmm, we can use the with statement with ish and with, and then how many column is this? Oh, there's a lot. Okay, let's do that manually for each column. So that range a and next row that value is equals to ssh that range a and x that value, and we can do the same for the other column. So let me just copy that. So b c d e f g, and then let's just replace that b c d e f g b c d e f g. So we do it this way since our column name or column position here is just the same with our sales order data. So we can do it like that. So going back to VBA code, uh, okay. And I think we can also add an application.screenUpdating command so that we don't see the other workbook being opened by VBA. So let's place the first command prior opening the other workbook. We can do that in here. Application that screen updating is equals to false. And then we need to place another command after closing the workbook. So application that screen updating is equals to true. Okay. So now let's another thing, we also need to create a procedure that clear the item worksheet data. So let's create a procedure. First, I will name that sub clear items, and then let me copy the name of the range first. Clear items, copy that. Okay, copy. Go here, and then we can just do it in one line. This workbook, that sheets, items, that range, that clear. I think we can use clear contents. Let me check if this procedure works. I think it is. We can also add a button for that. We can just copy this one, copy, paste, and then let's change the caption to clear and make it a bit smaller and change the background to red. And we need to associate here the clear item procedure. So look for that. Where's the clear item? I don't find it. Clear item. Oh, this one. Clear items. So if we click it, we are not getting an error. So I hope that's working fine. And then here in the copy data, we need to associate the copy matching record procedure. So where is that? This one, copy matching record. So before we test it, make sure that the other workbook is closed because it may cause an issue. So now let's try to select desk and then click the copy data button. Now let's select the sample data file, and here we can see that we only get 3 items from the file, and these are all desk item. Let's try to clear it first, and then let's try another item. Let's check pencil, copy data, select the file, and here we're getting a lot of records. So we have, yeah, 13 pencil. Okay, last one. Let's check the other item. I think that's a binder. Again, let's click copy data, select the file, and now we're also getting a lot of items for binder. I think that's around, oh, that's around 15. I think we can validate that from the office supply worksheet. Let's try to filter this and let's select binder. Let's see how many items are in here. If it's 15, then our program is is working properly. So yeah, it's good that we have that confirmed. And now we also have a program that copies specific data from another workbook. In this section, you will find the most common functions in VBA to manipulate strings in Excel. And we will create a simple program using those functions for you to get familiar with them. So here I have a new worksheet named string, and you can find a link in the video description to download it. And in this worksheet, we have a list of string or text, and our goal is to split each of this text using a string function. And I know there is an easy way to do this in Excel, like the text column function, but for now, let's forget about that feature's existence and use VBA to do it. So we will get each string's total number of characters in the len column. Then using the INSTR function, we will find the position of the two hyphen characters and return the integer value of those position in that string. Next, we will use the left function to extract the leftmost characters from a string. And to extract the rightmost characters from a string, we will use the right function. And lastly, to extract a substring starting in the middle of a string, we will use the mid function. Then once we complete the program and run it, the output should look like this. So now let's start doing it in VBA. Let's open VBA Editor. And then here I will create a new module. So right click, insert a new module, and I will name this module string. And then I will create a new sub procedure named string manipulation. And then inside this procedure, I will start by declaring a worksheet variable. So let's call that SSH as worksheet. And then we need to set that variable equals to worksheet string. Next, we need to declare a counter variable because we need to loop through all the strings. So I will just name it A as long. And then we need to create a for next loop. So for A, we need to initialize the counter variable to 2 because that is the first row of our string value. And then the loop should be until the last row of the string column. So we can use the last row syntax. First, we need to indicate the worksheet, which is our SSH variable, that range, and then we need to indicate a column that always have a value. In this case, that is our column A, and then concatenate it with the rows that count, that end, exlap, that row. And then we need to close the for next loop with the next statement and the counter variable. And then inside this loop, first we need to assign the string value to a variable. So let's declare a variable, but let me add a comment first. So I'll just call it str of type string, and then the value of that variable should be equals to the worksheet and then range A, and then we need to concatenate the counter variable for the row, and that should be our str variable value. So now we can start with the len function. I'll add a comment here. And again, len is a function that is used to get the length of a string. So from the previous section, we have used this function different times. So I guess you're already familiar with it. And now let's declare a variable named len value of type integer. So this will hold the return value of the len function. So we can set that variable equals to the length function, and then we can use the str variable as an argument. And then we need to write the value or the result of the len function to the column B of our worksheet. So let's indicate the worksheet SSH that range. Is that column C or column B? That is column B. So let's say B, and then concatenate it with our row variable, which is the counter variable A, and then set the value equals to the len value. Now let's test the code and check it. So I will run it from here in the VBA editor, and then I will check my worksheet, and here we see that we have the len column populated with the number of characters on each of the string. So let me try to validate if the first len is correct. So 369 plus the 2 hyphen character, that is 11. So I guess that the other rows are also correct. Next is the INSTR function. So again, let's add a comment here. And this function is used to find the position of a substring in a string. So first, let's declare a variable named first dash pos or first dash position of type integer. And then we can set that variable equals to the inString function. And here the first parameter is the starting position. So let's indicate 1, which is also the first character in the string. The next parameter is the string where we want to find the substring, and that is our str variable. Then the third parameter is the substring that we want to find from the string. And it could be a text or a single character, and in our case it is the hyphen character. And now we can close the inString function. Then we also want to find the position of the second hyphen character. So let's declare a variable for that. Let's name it second dash position of type integer as well. And then we need to set that variable equals to the inString function again. And for the first parameter, we cannot use the value 1 because it will just return the same value on the first instr function. And the starting position in this case should be greater than the position of the first hyphen character. So to do that, we can use the value of the first dash pos position variable, and then we can add 1. And then the second parameter is the string where we want to find the substring, and that is our str variable. And the last parameter is the substring or the substring that we want to find, which is again the hyphen character. And next, we need to write both of the position to column C. So again, let's indicate the worksheet name, which is SSH.range C, C for the instr, and then concatenate the row number, which is our counter variable A. And here we can just concatenate the positions using an ampersand operator. So let's start with the first dash post variable, and then we can put a comma in between, and then the second dash fos. Okay, now let's test the code and check. So again, I will run it from here. And then let's see. Now we have the instr column populated with two locations. The first one is the position of the first hyphen character, and then the second value here is the position of the second hyphen character. I think we can add a button here so I don't have to click it or to run the program from the VBA editor. Let me quickly do that. Let's insert a simple shape, maybe this one, and then name it run, and let's give it a better format. Let's see, and let's center the text, and I think that should be fine. So let's minimize the ribbon, and then I will associate the string manipulation procedure to this button. Let's look for that. Okay, where's the string manipulation? Okay, so now let me try to manually delete these values and click this run button, and now we have the same result. Okay, going back to VBA Editor. Next is the left function. So let's add some space in here. Let's close the immediate window, and then let's add some space. So next is the left function. And the left function is used to extract the leftmost characters from a string. And this is a simple function, so we can assign directly the result of the left function. So again, first let's indicate the target cell. So that is our SSH.range, that is column D, and A, that value. And then we can set the value equals to the left function. And the first parameter here is the string where we want to extract the leftmost character, and that is our str variable. And then the next parameter is the length of the string that we want to extract. Since we don't have a fixed length of the leftmost text, we can use the first hyphen position, which is the value of the first dash variable. And if we execute it now, let's try and test the code. Let's go back here, run. Now we can see that we have an extra hyphen character on the result. So what we can do is to subtract a value 1 to the first dash position so that it will not include the hyphen character on the result. So let's subtract 1. Let's go back to the Excel. Let's run it again. And now we have only the leftmost character or the leftmost text on in our string. Okay, next let's do the right function. So this function is used to extract the rightmost character from a string. And similar with what we did on the left function, we can indicate the target cell first, which is column E, and then we can set that equals to the right function. And similar parameters with the left function. The first parameter here is the string where we want to get the rightmost character or text, and that is our str variable. And for the second parameter, which is the length of the string that we want to extract, we also don't have a fixed length for the rightmost text. So for this, we can create an expression that subtract the position of the second hyphen character from the total length of the string. For the string length, we have the len value variable, which is the result of the len function earlier. And then we can subtract the second hyphen position, which is our second dash pos variable value. So now let's go back to the worksheet and let's test the code. And now let's check the value in the right column. And yep, we captured the rightmost character or the rightmost text in our string. So lastly is the mid function. Let's go back to the VBA editor and let's do the mid function. So this function is used to extract a substring starting in the middle of a substring or in the middle of a string. So here we can do it directly as well. We can indicate our target cell, which in this case is the column F. And then we can set it equals to the mid function. And here the first parameter is the string where we want to extract a substring, and that is our str variable. And then the next parameter is the starting position or the first character of the substring that we want to extract. Since we don't have a fixed starting position, we need to use a formula to identify it. What we can do is use the first dash position variable, and then we can add 1. It is because if you take a look on our string, the first character of the middle string always after the first hyphen in the string. That's why we can use that formula in our mid function. And then the third parameter is the length of the string. Again, we don't have a fixed length for the string, so we also need to use a formula for that. And what we can do is to subtract the first hyphen position from the second hyphen position, because our target string is in between those characters. So let's do that. Second dash position. So we need to subtract the first dash position from it. Then we can subtract 1 to remove the hyphen character on the result. But before we do that, let me show you what will happen if we don't subtract 1 from the result of this expression. Let's go back to Excel and run this code. Now you can see that we were able to extract the middle text from the string, but we are also getting an additional hyphen character at the end of the text. So to avoid that, we can go back to VBA Editor and we need to subtract 1 so that the last character, which is the hyphen character, will not get included on the result of this function. So now let's go back here and click the run button. And now all the columns are populated using the string functions in VBA. And this is just a simple program, but you can always refer to it for reference when you are dealing with a more complicated scenario requiring string manipulation. A user form is a custom-built dialog box that makes a user data entry more controllable and easier to use for the user. And in this section, you will learn to design a simple form and add data into Excel. So here we have a new worksheet named roster, and this will act like a database for our simple app. And once we run the program, it will look like this. So first it will show this user form name roster. In this form, we have a list box that shows the same records in our roster worksheet. It also shows the total number of records in the app. And then we also have here a label showing the current day-to-day based on my system. And then we have a button add profile that when we click will show another form where we can add a new profile to our roster worksheet. So let's try a sample. So for the first name, we can input a profile first name, maybe Maybelline, Benuela, and let's select a gender. And here we have a drop-down control where we can select a role and a location. And once we click save, we will get a message box confirming that the record has been added. And to verify if that has been added, we can click cancel. And when the roster user form show up, here we can see in the list box that a new record with the first name Maybelline has been added. The record has been updated as well. And we can also confirm that to our roster worksheet. So once we check this, we should see Maybelline details added in here. Now let's create the tool. Let's start by creating a new worksheet and name it roster. And then let's add some column header in this worksheet. So the first column is for the first name, then last name, gender, role, and location. Then let's add some background color and also extend the width of each column. Right. So all data we will input in the user form later will go to this worksheet. Now let's open VBA Editor. And from here, we need to add user form. So to add a user form, you can right click here in the project window, click insert and then user form, or you can also click insert from here and then select user form. So the first user form, I will name this using the properties window, go to the name properties and I will name this FRM roster. And then we want to change the caption of the user form. So just look for the caption property and change that to roster. And let's expand the size of this user form. So before we add any control to this form, let's add a background color first. So just look for the back color properties, and then from here you can select your preferred background color. Maybe I will just select the same background color. And then the first control that we will add is a label. So we want to show the current date based on the system date here in the user form using a label control. So just look for your toolbox and then look for the label control, and then we can draw a label here, and then we can change the caption to day to day, and then we can also change the font properties. So just click this button beside the font properties, and then from here you can select the font style, and you can also change the font size. So I'll just select 14, and then since it's not visible, let's change the fore color to white. Right, I think that should be fine, and then I can just copy that and paste, and then let's put the date value in here. So let's change the name of this label control to LBL date today. So the first label, I did not change the name property because we're not going to change the caption or value of that later. But this one, we need to update this once we run the form, and it should the text of this label should be the current date of the machine. So for the meantime, I will just change the caption to the date format I prefer, which is MMDD and YYY. And then let's also add a label that will show the total number of records that we have in our worksheet. So I can just again copy this and paste that in here and maybe here, and then change the caption of this label to records, and then let's adjust the width of that label, and then this one we will change the name of this label to LBL records, and then let's also change the caption to 0. The next control that we need to add in this user form is the button. So let's look for the button control. This is the button or command button. So just click that and let's draw that here in this part of the user form. And then let's change the name first of this button so we can easily identify it later once we start coding. Let's name it CMD. I'm using the prefix CMD, which stands for command button, and I will name this add profile. And then let's also change the caption of the button to add profile, and let's format the button so it will look better. So let's change the back color first. Maybe we can use what should we use? Maybe this one. I'm not good at design, so apologies for that. Next, let's change the font to Arial as well, and then let's make it maybe narrow bold, and then let's use 16 font size. And then lastly, in this form, we need to have a list box that will show all of our records. So look for the list box control here in our toolbox. So this one. And then let's draw a list box here. And then for now, let's just change the name of this list box to LST roster. And then let's change some of the property of this list box. For example, for the column heads, by default it is set to false. We can set that equals to true. And then for the column count, we have a 5 columns, so we have to change it to 5. And if you do that, you will see that the list box is updating. And then what else we should change? I think we can change the row source of the list box. So we need to map this to our roster worksheet. So, and to do that, we can type the name of the worksheet, which is roster, and then use an exclamation point. And then we need to indicate a range. So for example, A2 to E2, which is the range of our roster. So if we do that, you will see in our list box here that we have the column header with value. And now we can change the style of that header. So let's go to font, and then let's also select Arial to make it standard. Let's just choose regular and 14 for the font size and hit OK. Now I think it looks better. Let me just align this button in here. And what we want to happen is that when we click this add profile button, it should show up another user form where we can add a profile. So let's do that by adding a new user form. So here, right click and add a user form. And then first, let's change the name of this form to FRM. Maybe we can name it add. And then let's change the caption to add profile. And then let's also resize this form. And again, first, before we add any control to this form, first we need to change the background color using the back color properties. And in here, maybe we can select a different background color. Maybe that's not good. Maybe this one. I don't think so. Maybe this one is enough, similar to the sample I showed earlier. So in this form, we want to have a field for each of the columns. So first name, last name, gender, the role, and location. So let's start with the first name field. Let's add a label first, and I will change the caption to first name. And then let's change the font as well. Let's use the same font, Arial, regular, and 14. And then of course the fore color to make it better. And then after that, we need to add a new control, a text box control where user can input a value. So let's look for the text box control and then draw that in here. And let's change the name property first. So make sure that you have the text box selected. I will name it txt first name. And then let's also change the font property to Arial, regular, and 14. And then let's extend the width of the first name. Then we can just copy this. Oops, let's okay, arrow key I believe is not working if you want to move the control a bit lower. What you can do is you can go to the property of the text box, for example, and then look for the top property, and then we can change that to 20. So the control will move a little bit down. Now I think it's aligned to the label. Now let's copy both of this control and paste. And this will be the field for the last name. So let's just change the caption of this label to last name. And then the text box, let's check or let's change the name to txt last name. And next we want to have a control where we can select the profile gender. For that we can use a radio button or an option button. So first let's add a frame For the gender options, let's look for the frame control. Okay, this one. And then, so you can use frame if you want to group controls in VBA user form. So now let's change this caption to gender. Let's go to caption, change that to gender, and then let's also change the font style. So again, let's select Arial, regular, and 14, and then we need to change the fore color as well. Let's set that equals to white, and then inside this frame, we can add two option button, one for male and female. So to do that, look for the option button control here in the toolbox, and we can draw that here. And let's change the name to OPT male, and then let's also change the caption to male, and let's move that a bit close to the frame top. Let's copy the control and paste that here, and then let's change the name of this one to OPT female, and of course change the caption to female. And let's minimize this a bit. So now we have a control for selecting gender. Next, we want to have a drop down where we can select the profile role. So first, let's add a label and drop down here in VBA user form is combo box. So look for this control combo box, and then let's throw that in here. And I think it's a bit big. So now let's change the name of this control to CBO role. Let's change this caption first to, or this label caption to role. And then here later we will add some items that user can choose from. And next we also want to have a location control in here. So let's just copy this. Let me move this a bit so that will be aligned to the label. So let's look for the top property, and maybe we can add 2 points only, and now it's aligned to the label. Now let's copy that and paste, and this control will be for the location. So let's change this caption to location, and then of course this one we also need to change the name to CBO location. So I highly recommend that you always name your controls properly so that when you start coding, you can easily identify them. So lastly, in this user form, we need to have two buttons. One for saving the profile, and then the other one is if user would like to cancel adding a profile. So we can use again a command button for that. So let's start with the save button. So let's change the name to CMD save. Oops. And then the caption should be save. And then of course we need to change the style of that button. Let's set that equals to Arial, a narrow bold, and 16 font size. And let's add a color to the button as well. Maybe what? What should be the color? This one. I think it's not good. Maybe this one. I think better. We can copy this button for the cancel button. So let's just copy paste that. And then let's change the name of this button to CMD cancel. And then change the caption to cancel. And of course the back color so it's not confusing. Maybe we can set that equals to gray, which is the default color. So now we have all the controls added to this user form, and now we can start coding this user form so we can add data to the worksheet. So let's start the VBA code in the roster form. So here we need to add a code in this button that will show up the the add user form where we can add a new profile. So to add a VBA code, you can right click on the control and select view code, or you can simply double click on the control, and then it will automatically create a procedure for that button. And then here you will notice an underscore, and follow to that is the event for that button. So here we see click, and we can also see here the event selected for that button is click. So if you want to select a different event for that button, you can select from here. So for example, double click. When you select that event, it will automatically create a different or another procedure for the button add profile with a different event. But for now, let's just focus on the click event. And what we want to happen is that if the user click this button, it should show the add user form. So to do that, first we need to unload this user form using the command unload me. And then to show the add user form, we can indicate the user form name, which is frm add, and then just use the show function. So now when we go back to our user form and run this form, once we click this add profile, it will show the add profile user form. So here we don't have any VBA code. So what we want to happen when we are on this form and then the user click the cancel button, it should close this form and show the roster user form again. So let's do that in VBA. So here in the add user form, let's double click on cancel, and then let's use the same command that we use from the first button. So unload me first, and then we need to indicate the name of the form that we want to show. In this case, it should be the frm roster that show. Now let's go back to raster form again and run this. So add profile, and then when we click cancel, so it's just switching between these two user form. Okay, so let's start coding to the add profile user form so we can insert data in here, and then though that data should be inserted in the roster worksheet once we click the save button. So let's go back to the VBA editor and then open the add profile user form, and then in here let's click the save button. And what we can do is declare a variable for each of the field. So let's say we have name of types, or that's first name. So first name a string, and then last name of string as well. The gender is also a string. And what else do we have in here? A role, it should be of type string as well. And then the location of type string. And next we can assign the value of our control to this variable. So to assign the text we input in the first name text box to the first name variable, we can first we can indicate the name of the control. So for the first name, that is txt first name. And to access the text in that control, we can use the dot value, and then we can assign that to our first name variable. And we can do the same for the last name variable. So last name is equals to the control txt last name that value. For the gender, it's a bit different because we are using a radio or an option button control in here. So we need to check which option button is selected. So to do that in VBA, we can use an if condition. So if opt male, that value is equals to true. So if the option button is selected, the value of that control is set to true. So we need to use then and if opt male or option button male is selected, we need to assign uh, a male value to the variable gender. Now, if the selected option button is the female one, then we can assign the value female to the gender variable. Next is the role, but we don't have a role yet, so I guess we can start with that. So, okay, let's continue this code later. We need to add an option first for the role and location. So to do that, let's go back here in the user form, and then from here we need to add an option to this drop-down controls when the user form show up. So let's right-click here anywhere in the user form, and then click View Code. And when you do that, it will create a procedure for the user form, which is the form, and then by default it will create an event click, but we don't want to trigger this next code on the click event. What we want is the initialize event, so let's select initialize. So this event is getting triggered in VBA every time we launch the user form. So when that happens, we want to add option to our drop down control. So let's start with the role combo box. So let's go back in the VBA code and let's add some space in here. So first, we can access the control using a with statement. So let's say with CBO role, that's the name of our control. And then in that object or control, we can access the property that add item. So what are the role that we can add? Maybe analyst, and then we can also add a senior analyst, and lastly is specialist. Okay, next is for the location. Again, we can use the with statement. So with CBO location and with, then let's access the add item property. Maybe we can start with India. Then let's also add USA and Philippines. What else? Maybe what else? What other country we can use? Maybe three options is enough. Okay, so now to test this code, let's go back to the add user form and then let's run it. So now when we launch this form and click this drop down, we can see now option for the role as well as for the location. Okay, I think we should also change the format of this two drop downs. So let's fix that first before I forget. So let's change the font. Maybe we can select both of this control, and then we can go to font and select Arial, regular, and 14. Now let's try to test this again, and now it's better. Okay, so let's continue to the save button code. Okay, let me close that and double click again on the save button. Then our next field is the role. So for the role variable, we can get the value from the CBO role control, that value. Same with the location variable, so that is equals to CBO location that value. And after we have the value assigned to each of the variable, we can now transfer the data to the roster worksheet. But first, we need to identify what is the next available row in our roster worksheet. So first, let's declare a worksheet variable and name it RSH, and then set that variable equals to this workbook that sheets roster. And then let's also declare a variable for the next row as long, and next row is equals to the RSH that range A and rows that count that end XLF row. So again, the syntax will return the last row with value in column A of the roster worksheet. And to get the next available row, we need to add one to the syntax. And after that, we can start transferring the data to our worksheet. So let's use the with statement, and then let's use the roster object variable, which is RSH. And then in here, we can start with range A, which is the first name column, and then let's concatenate the address to the next row variable. So the value will be equals to the first name variable value, and then let's just copy this 4 more times. So let's change this to B, C, D, and E. And then let's change the variable. This one is for the last name. Next is for the gender, then role and location. And lastly, after we transfer the data, we want to clear the text in this user form. So to do that, we can add a comment here. So this is for clear the control values. And then here, let me add a transfer data to worksheet roster. So to clear the control, we can start with the first name text box. So txt first name that value, we can set that value equals to an empty string. Same with the txt last name that value. And then for the gender option button, we can say opt gender or opt male. That value is equals to false, similar to the opt female. That value should be equals to false. And then the cbo role, that value we can also set that to an empty string, as well as for the location control. Okay, and then we want to have a message box saying that record has been added, so we know it is successfully added. So let's use a message box, and let's say its record has been added, and then let's add a information icon to this message. So now let's start from the roster form. Let's run it, and then click add profile, and then let's insert some sample profile here, maybe George Mouse. I can't think of any last name. Let's select female. For example, he's an analyst in USA. Now when we click save, we can see this message pop up, and we can also see in the background in our roster worksheet that the data we input in this user form has been transferred to the worksheet. Now let's try to add another profile. For example, maybe Maria, uh, Uganda, and gender is female. A senior analyst from India, and save. And once we click OK, we can see that the new record has been added to the roster worksheet. And when we click cancel, we can only see one item in our list box here in the roster user form. Is it because we only set the row source to a default value? So what we can do is to update the row source property during the user form runtime. So let's close this form first, and let's go back to VBA Editor. And we also have some item pending here, like we don't have yet a day-to-day value. I think we can start from there. Let me just move it a bit right. So we need to update the day-to-day value on the initialize event of the user form. So again, let's right click here, view code, and then let's select the initialize event and remove this procedure. And then let's say indicate the name of the label. So that's LBL day to day, and we want to change the caption to the current date. So we can use the format function, and then here we need to indicate the date. So we can use the now and then the format that we want. So for example, month, date, and year. So now if I run this form, we can see that the day-to-day label caption is updated to the current system date. And then we also need to update the row source of this list box control. So to do that, let's go back again to the user form initialize event. So this is for the day-to-day, and then here we want to update the row source property of the list box so that every time we add a new profile, it will automatically reflect in our list box. So to do that, let's first indicate the name of the control, which is lst roster, and then we can access the row source property. And here we can do the same on how we add a default value to the list box. So here we need to indicate the name of the worksheet, so that is roster and then an exclamation point, and then the starting cell address is A2, and then the last column is E. But here we can make it flexible by uh, concatenating it to the last row in that worksheet. So we can say, and we can do it directly using this workbook that sheets roster that range A and rows that count that end XLAP that row. So now if I run this user form, now we can see two profile showing in our list box because we also have two records in our worksheet. Now let's try to add new profile. Why I'm having hard time thinking of a sample data. Maybe we can use Glenn. Conda. It's a male, maybe from an analyst from the Philippines. And once we click save, record has been added. We can see his details in our worksheet. Let's also add another female profile, maybe Linda, uh, Donna, Linda Donna, female gender, role is specialist from USA, and then hit the save button. Now Linda is also added to the roster worksheet. Now if I click cancel, we can also see four records in our list box. So it is almost completed. I think the last thing here is the records. Now we can only see zero value here, but it should show four items in here. So to do that, let's close this user form first. Let's go back to the roster user form. And then in the initialize event of the user form, we can count the number of records that we have. So, and I think we can use the syntax to identify the total number of items that we have. So what I will do is I will declare a variable last row of type long, and then I will set that variable equals to this syntax. I will just cut it from here and assign it to this variable. Now we can just concatenate that variable in here for setting the row source property of the roster list box. And then to get the records, we can indicate the control, which is the LBL records. And then we want to set the caption equals to the last row. But since we have a header in our worksheet, we need to subtract 1 to get the actual number of records. So now if I run this program, we can see the records label has been updated to 4, which is the number of profile that we have in this app. Now, last task is to add another profile. Um, let's think of a name, maybe a female one, maybe Lexi, Gunda, and a female from from India. When we sit, when we hit the save button, so we have this confirmation message that the record has been added, and we can also see that in the background. Now, if we press cancel, the record has been updated to 5, and we can also see here Lexi as part of our list box. All right, so I hope you had an introduction now to the VBA user form and how you can use different controls. And in the sample, you were able to add data from user form that also goes to the Excel worksheet. In this section, I will introduce how you can use Selenium in VBA to automate web applications. And before we use Selenium in VBA, we need to install two pieces of software. The first is the Selenium, and you can navigate to this link to download the installer, and you can check the link in the video's description. So on the side, you have to download the latest version of the installer, and once downloaded, you have to install it, and when prompted to select component, you should select the compact installation. The next one is the Webdriver, depending on your preference, and you can download the Firefox driver or Edge driver, but I prefer to use the Chrome driver. And before you download the Chrome driver, you must check the Chrome version first. So you can do that by clicking here in More Tools, click Help, and then click About Google Chrome. And here you will find the version of your Chrome browser. So for example, in my case, that is 112. So for the Chrome driver, you can navigate to this link. Again, you can find this in the video description, and then go to downloads. Then click the version that matches your browser version. So in my example earlier, my Chrome version is 112, so I have to select this. And then lastly here, you will download the zip file based on your operating system. So if you are on Windows, you can download this. If you are on Mac, you can select from these options. And then after downloading the zip file, you have to extract it and then copy the Chrome driver.exe file to the Selenium folder. And you can find the Selenium folder either in your program files folder or the user app data local folder. In my case, it's always getting installed to my user local folder. And to navigate to that folder, you can just go to your C drive, click users, select your user folder, and then from here you can type app data and then local, press enter. And then once you are inside this folder, look for the Selenium basic folder, this one. And then in this folder, you should copy or paste the Chrome driver.exe file that we downloaded from the Chrome driver website. So we will create two sample programs using Selenium. The first program will navigate to the RPA Challenge website, and then it will click the movie search link, and it will input a movie title and click the find button, and then it will parse the movie titles result, and then we will print them to the immediate window. The second program will navigate to the fake name generator website, and on the website we will generate a fake profile where we will select a gender, a name set, and then a country. Then we will click the generate button, and we will parse the generated profile, and then we will print that information to VBA immediate window. So here I have a new macro enabled Excel file named VBA Selenium. First, let's open the VBA Editor, and then let's add a reference to Selenium. You can do that by clicking Tools, click References, and then here look for the Selenium type library, this one. Just tick that checkbox and then hit OK. And in VBA, references are like libraries. Now that we added Selenium, we can access all the classes and methods of that object. Next, let's create a new module. Insert a module, and then I will name this Selenium. And then let's create a procedure. I will name this RPA challenge movies. And then inside this procedure, let's declare a variable for our Chrome driver. So I will name that ch selenium, oops, selenium that Chrome driver, because I will be using a Chrome web browser for this automation. And then let me add a comment that this is for the Chrome driver. And then let's create a new instance of the Chrome driver by using the set keyword, because our ch variable is an object, and when we are setting an object we need to use the set keyword. So set ch is equals to new selenium.chrome driver. And then next we can open the browser using the ch, which is our Chrome driver, and then the start method. So if we test the procedure by clicking run, it will open the Chrome browser, and if you notice that it will automatically close once it is complete. And that happens because we have the Chrome driver variable inside the procedure. We can declare the Chrome driver variable as a global variable. So we need to move the declaration outside of the procedure like this. We can use dim declaration for global variables, but we can also use private or public declaration. In this case, I will use the private declaration. When you declare a variable as a private, meaning you cannot access this variable on the other module. So if you have other module in here, you won't be able to access that variable because it is only accessible within its module, which is the mod Selenium module. And then next here in our code, maybe I can also add a comment here, open browser, and then let's remove the space. Next, what we can do is we can navigate to the site using the ch.get method, and we need to use the website URL as an argument for this method. So let's check the URL from the website. So let's copy this link. Let's go to the initial page. So let's copy this link and let's go back to VBA, and then let's paste that link. And we can also maximize the browser window using the ch window method that maximize. And now let's test the code to see how it works. So here you can see that it navigates to the RPA challenge website and also maximize the browser window. So next we want to click the movie links on this page, and to do that we need to know what the web element is. So we need to open the Chrome DevTools by pressing F12, or you can point your mouse cursor to the web element like this, and then you can right click and then select inspect, and you will find the element highlighted in the source code. If you use DevTools, you can use this select button and then indicate the target element, and it will also highlight the element in the source code. So here the element is an anchor or an A tag with an inner text movie search, and we can click that element using that text. So in Selenium, let's add a comment first. Input, or sorry, click movie search. In Selenium, we can use the method find element by link text, and then we can use the movie search value as an argument. Then we can also use the click method to trigger a click event on the element. So now let's test the code to check. Okay, so now the program navigated to the page and clicked the movie search, and now we are on this page. So next we want to input a movie title in this search box. So we need to check this element. Again, we can just point our cursor here and then right click and select inspect. And then if it did not work, you can use this select element and then indicate the element from the page. And here we can see that it is an input element with a name attribute search str, and we can use it to find this element in Selenium. So here in Selenium, let's add a comment, input movie title. So here we can use the method find element by name, and then we can use the name attribute value. Let me copy that again. That is search str, copy, go back to VBA. We can use that name attribute value as an argument, and then we can use the method sendKeys and then indicate the title that we want to search. So for example, we can, let me think of a title, maybe swordfish. And then next we must click the find button to search for the input movie title. So again, let's just use this select button here and indicate the find button. And here we can see that it is a button element with no ID or class attribute that we can use. And we can use XPath, but I think it's an advanced topic. So in this case, we can use element indexing. So what we are going to do is we will create a collection of buttons element. We will look through that collection and then we will check which button has an inner text of find. So in VBA, let's declare two variables, but let's add a comment again that this is to click the find button. Okay, let me add some space. So let's declare two variable here. First is a name buttons as selenium that web elements with an S. So that variable will hold the collection of button element. The next variable we will name it button as selenium that web element without an S, and we will use this variable for looping through the collection. Now let's set the buttons variable equals to ch that we can use the method find element by tag, and then let's use the value button as an argument for this method, and then after that we can loop with that buttons element using for each loop, and then we can use our button variable as a counter in buttons, next button. And then here we can use an if condition to check if the button text property is like find. Then if that condition is met, we can uh, access the click method of that button element. And of course, once we find the target button, we need to end the loop by using the exit for statement. So now let's test the code to check. Again, let's run this procedure from here. Okay, so it seems like the click method did not work. Okay, let me check VBA. So we got an error here. Let me check debug. And here we get an error because uh, when you are setting a elements variable or an elements object, you need to use the find elements instead of find element. So let me stop this procedure for now and just rerun it. And now we can see that the program could search for the movie and now we can see some results. So Next, we want to parse the movie results title, and then we will print this title in the immediate window. So let's check this element. Again, inspect. Again, it did not work. We can use this select button in here. Let's check one title. And here in the um, source code, we can see that the title is inside a span element. And that span element is also inside a div element with a class card content. So let me just verify if we can find three div element with this class. So I will be using expat here in the dev tool. Sorry, we cannot discuss about this, but yeah, I will just verify if I can use that element in our Selenium. So here I can use the contains, and then I want to check if how many div element have the class card content. And here I can see that we have three results. So if I go down, as you can see here in the page, it is highlighting those elements. So I guess we can use that. This is an expat, but I said we will not be using expat. So let me try to do that using element indexing. And then I think we can also check if we can find the span using this expat. And yes, indeed, we have the same result. So what we will do is we will first create a collection of div element, and then we will find a span element inside of those elements. All right, I think it's hard to explain, but let me do that now in VBA. So let me first copy the class. Then here we want to parse the movie titles, and let's create another two variable divs. I will just name it divs selenium dot web elements, and then the other one is div only selenium dot web element. Or maybe I should name them spans instead of div, because that's the web element that where we have the movie title. And then let's set the spans variable equals to ch that find element by class. Since the div attribute has a class attribute, so we can use that div. And then inside that element, we can again use, okay, we cannot use find element here. I think we should have that variable divs and not span. So let's use div again. Okay, so now we can loop through that collection using again a for each loop for each div in divs. And then we can declare a variable movie title of type string, and we let me add some space here, and then we can set that variable equals to the div element, and then inside that element we will be using the method find element by tag. And now we will be using span, and then we will get the, can we use the text? I think we can. And then after we set the variable, we will just use debug.print to print the title in the immediate window. Okay, so now let's run this procedure. Now let's check VBA. And here we were not able to print anything because I guess there's some kind of delay after clicking find before VBA can check if there are movie results. So what we can do is we can add delay in VBA before it check if there are some movie title result, and we will put that code after clicking the define button. So here we can use the application that wait, and then we can use the syntax now, time value, and then we'll just use maybe 5 seconds. Okay, I don't know what happened earlier, what's wrong, but now it's working. So let's try to run this procedure again. So let's wait for 5 seconds. I think we should have a message box so that we know when the procedure is completed. Let's check VBA. And here we still did not get anything on the immediate window. So let's check why. Okay, let's try to debug this code. I will add a breakpoint here and then run the procedure. And then let me go to the VBA. So now let's try to debug this code. I will check the number of element. Okay, so it did not found any. Ah, okay. I think I know what my fault is right now. I'm using the class div, and I think we don't have that kind of class in our web page. So let me go back to the website, and then here we need to get the card content. That is our target class. So let me clear the immediate window. Now let's try to run this program again. Okay, I think 5 seconds is done. Now if we check the immediate window, we can see the three titles now printed in our immediate window, sort page, age of, and that is the last part of our first Selenium program, where we have explored some of the functions that we can use with Selenium, opening the browser, how we can maximize, how we can click a link, how we can input a text to a search box or to an input element. Here we also have a way to click a button by using, I called it an element indexing. I don't know how other call that. And then we use the same approach when in terms of finding the title of the movie result. For the next program, let's create a new procedure. I will name this fake name generator. And then inside this procedure, we can use the same variable for the Chrome driver. So we can just start by creating a new instance of that variable using the set keyword, selenium.chrome driver. And then let's open the browser using the ch.start method. And then next we will navigate to the site. So to navigate to a website, we need to use the method get. And then we can use the web URL as the argument for that method. Okay, so now let's test this procedure to check. Okay, for now, let's not maximize the browser window. Next, what we want here is to first select a gender. So we need to check this element. We can again right click and select inspect. And okay, it did not highlight the element. So let's use this from the dev tool. Then you can point to that element. And here in the source code, we can see that it's a select element and it has an ID. And we can use this attribute to find that element. So I will just copy that. And then here in our BVA, I will first add a comment, select gender, and then what I'm going to do is I will declare a variable gender select of type Selenium, that web element, and then I will set that variable using the method find element by ID, and then I will use the ID as an argument for that method, and then I will be using that variable. And then here in Selenium, there is a method named as select, and you can use this when you are dealing with select element like what we have here in the gender. And then there are different methods you can use for this. You can select by index, you can also select by text, and also you can select by value. If we go back to the page, here we can see that the options have a value. If we want to use that, we can choose select by value, or we can also select by text. And if we select that option, we need to select the inner text. So now I will maybe just select the text. So I will copy that sample text, and here we will select by text, and then we need to use the text as an argument for this method. Let's test this first before we proceed with the other drop-down elements. So let's run the program. And then here we can see that it was able to select male on the gender drop-down. So next we also want to select the name set and then the country. So let's start with the name set. Again, inspect. Okay, I will just use this button again and indicate the element. So here we can see that it is also a select element with an ID attribute. So again, we can use that ID, which is n. And then for the option, I think we can use value this time. So what what we can select? Maybe German. So the value is GR. So let's go back to VBA. Okay, so here select name set, and then let's again declare a variable for that selenium that web element, and let's add some space in here, and then we can set that variable using find element by ID, which is n, and then using that variable we can again use the select method, and this time we will select by value. We will select German, and the value of that option is GR. And then let's also check the element for the country, or say select country. So let's go back to the web page and then indicate the country element. So again, it's a select element, and then the ID is C. And then for the country, let's select a country. United States is the default. Maybe we can use Australia. I will just use text again for this one. So copy that. And then here, let's declare a variable for the country. Should be a selenium.web element, and set that variable equals to ch. Again, find element by ID. This time is C. And then we can set that variable equals, or we can use the select method, and then we will select by text, and we'll select Australia. And next to that, we also want to click the generate button. So here, if we inspect the generate button, we can see that it's an input element and it has an ID. So we can simply use the method find element by ID to click this button. So let me copy that. And here, let's add a comment, click generate button, and then we can do that directly using find element by ID, paste the ID of the button, and then we can access the click method. Okay, so now let's test this code first and check if it works. So, yep, I guess it works because it was able to select male, German, and Australia for the country. And then it generate a new fake profile. So next thing here, what we want to do is to extract the name of the profile, and then I think we can also extract the address, and then we can print that in the immediate window. So let's open the dev tool by pressing F12, and then we can highlight the target element. So here we can see that it's a header element, an H3. So let's check first how many H3 element do we have on this page using the XPath H3, and we have 9. So I guess we cannot use that one. How about this div element? Let's check how many div element with the class address is. So let's start with, oh sorry, that's not the XPath window. Let's start with the div, and then let's use the contains, and then class, and then say address, and here we can only find one. So I guess we can use this to find the name of the generated profile. So first we can find element by class address, and then within that element we can use the find element by tag h3, and then we can capture the text property of the element and assign that to a variable. So let's do that in VBA. Okay, let me clear my XPath first. Let me copy this class. Then in the VBA, first let's declare a name variable of type string, and then we can set that variable equals to ch. First let's find elements element by class, and the class is, oh sorry, the class is address. And then inside that element again we'll find element by tag, this time is h3, and then we will access the text property. Okay, so here, so we also want to parse the address, the generated address. So let's use this select button again, and here we can see that it's also within the address div element, but this time, hmm, okay, it has a class. Let's check if we can find this class using XPath. Contains class. Okay, I think we can use this class. So we can just use the method find element by class, and then we can access the text of the element. So let's do that in VBA. So here let's declare another variable name address of type string, and then we can set that address equals to ch that find element by class, and oh css by class, and then use the class, and then we can simply access the text method. And then lastly, we can print those value in the immediate window. So let me clear this first, and then we'll just use debug.print. And then let's start with the name, or maybe we can do it this way. Concatenate the name value, and then concatenate it with this and the address value.
Okay, so now let's also add a message box so we have an indication if the process is completed. So process complete. Let's just add an information icon. And then let's also close the website once we parse the information. And we can do that using ch.close. So that will close the entire browser that we open. So now let's test the procedure. Yes, okay. So now we have this message indicating that the process is complete. And here in the immediate window, we can see the name that was parsed or the generated fake profile name as well as the address. And yeah, that is our two program now using VBA and Selenium for web automation. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful and learned something new. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comment section below. Remember, practice makes perfect, so don't be afraid to experiment with what you've learned today. And if you want to see more tutorial like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any update. Once again, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next tutorial video.